is only one undefeated team in the NFL, the Philadelphia Eagles. 2 years ago, the Eagles traded away their quarterback. They selected second overall and fired their head coach, both of which helped the franchise win a Super Bowl. Philadelphia went with a fresh start, and here they are, 7-0 and considered a serious contender with an MVP hopeful at quarterback. But how did they get back to the top so fast? The Eagles had a very magical season in 2018. Carson Wentz was in his second year and ended up playing like an MVP caliber player, but went down with a torn ACL. It kind of seemed like the season was over for Philadelphia, but that obviously wasn't the case. Nick Foles took over, and that stacked Philly D and some Foles magic led the Eagles to their first Super Bowl ever. Philly had gone 13-3 that year, but they haven't won double-digit games in a season since, although you bet they will this season. The Eagles went 9-7 in both 2018 and 2019. They made the playoffs in each season, but only won a single playoff game, a wild card game against the Bears that is forever known for the double doink, when Cody Parkey's potential game-winning field goal was blocked before hitting the upright and crossbar. Philadelphia had made the playoffs for 3 straight years before 2020, but ended up not just missing the postseason, but only winning 4 games, and in the midst, benched Carson Wentz in favor of rookie Jalen Hurts. The Eagles went into full restart mode after that 2020 season. Not only did Philly trade Wentz away to Indianapolis, but also fired Doug Peterson, who had been the head coach for 5 years. Philadelphia went ahead and hired Nick Sirianni, at the time the Colts offensive coordinator. All of a sudden, 2021 rolled around and it was a new era in Philadelphia. New Week 1 starter and new head coach. Philly ended up going 9-8 and made the playoffs, but lost in the wild card. Hurts had his moments, but there were some learning experiences. He ended up throwing for over 3,100 yards and 16 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. On the ground, Hurts had nearly 800 yards and 10 touchdowns. It was a good year for the Eagles and Hurts, but it was nothing compared to this season. Philadelphia is the only undefeated team in the league through 8 weeks at 7-0. Hurts is well in a 3-headed race for MVP right now, alongside Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. He's thrown for 1,800 yards and 10 touchdowns to only 2 interceptions. On the ground, Hurts has over 300 yards and 6 touchdowns. Hurts really has been great. The Eagles took a shot on him in the second round, and now in his 3rd season, he really is looking the part of a starting NFL quarterback. He's been one of the biggest reasons for the Eagles' rise, but he is far from the only reason. I'd really argue that the biggest piece to the Eagles' success was the decisions the team made this offseason. The biggest was obviously trading for A.J. Brown. It can't be understated just how good he is. A.J. Brown is one of the best wide receivers in the league, and Philly knew that. That's why they traded their first-round pick to the Titans for him, and then gave him a 4-year, $100 million contract. It has paid off huge. In 7 games, A.J. Brown has 659 yards and 5 touchdowns, and what needs to be even more discussed is how he changes the Eagles' offense. Brown is the type of player that opposing defenses have to game plan for and keep an eye on, and I think that's really opened the door for Devonta Smith at times. Now it does hurt because now Devonta isn't the number 1, but he's a great number 2. He had over 900 yards as a rookie last year after the Eagles took him in the first round. Devonta has over 400 yards and 2 touchdowns so far this year. Dallas Goedert has over 400 yards too and a single touchdown. He's been one of really the better tight ends in the NFL since the Eagles drafted him in the second round in 2018. Then the Eagles' 2019 second rounder, Miles Sanders, has been very good as well. Sanders has over 500 yards and 5 touchdowns rushing. Now, it isn't very sexy, I know, but if you're really looking for the biggest reason for the Eagles' offensive success, it's the offensive line. Things have been very easy for Jalen Hurts in the pocket. Nobody this season has had it easier than Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson by far. Those have been easily the 2 best pass blocker units in the league, and the Eagles have graded out a bit better. Philadelphia has a really good run block unit too, that's top 10 in the league. Now, the Eagles probably have the best tackle duo in the league. Jordan Mailata is a human wrecking ball. Philadelphia found an absolute gem in the 7th round back in 2018. The way he's progressed in the pros has been insane. Put him opposite All-Pro and 2013 first-round pick Lane Johnson, and you have a really good line. Philly has done an incredible job drafting linemen. Both guards, Landon Dickerson and Isaac Seumalo, were both Eagles draft picks. Dickerson in the 2nd round in 2021, and Seumalo was a 3rd in 2016. Finally, at center, Jason Kelce, 4-time All-Pro and 2011 Eagles 6th round pick. Jalen Hurts is getting a lot of the credit, as does every quarterback, but it's been the entire team around him having success too, especially on the defense. Philadelphia has graded out as a top 5 defense in the league this season. They have a top 10 pass rush and a top 10 coverage grade. The run defense has still been top half in the league too. It's a stacked D, and once you look at the roster on paper, you understand why. The left side of the Eagles defensive line is insane, and it has been for about a decade. Philly took Brandon Graham in the 1st round in 2010, and 2 years later selected Fletcher Cox in the 1st, both of which have been an All-Pro. The Eagles took another defensive lineman in the 1st round of this year's draft, Jordan Davis. Now, he went at 13, and if you don't know who Jordan Davis is, you probably don't watch college football. Davis was a massive 6'6", 340-pound defensive tackle that dominated at Georgia, and he's been just as good as a rookie so far, but is dealing with an ankle injury currently. The Eagles did just trade a 4th rounder for Robert Quinn, so you can add another All-Pro stud to that line. The D-line is the best part of the defense, but the Eagles do still have beasts all over. Philadelphia bolstered up their linebacker core in the offseason. Not only did they draft Nakobe Dean in the 3rd round, who was another member of that stacked Georgia defense, but they also signed Hassan Reddick to a 3-year, $45 million deal, and he's been great so far. Finally, the secondary. The Eagles traded a 3rd and a 5th to the Lions back in 2020 for Darius Slay. Philly turned around and gave him a 3-year, $50 million deal, and he's continued to be one of the better corners in the league. James Bradbury has been good opposite him after the Eagles signed him to a 1-year deal in the offseason after his time with the Giants. It did a little bit rocky, so the Eagles have a great roster and are undefeated. They are probably going for a 1st-round bye in the postseason and going to try to make a serious run, and probably can. The NFC is admittedly much worse than the AFC at the top, but here's what's crazy. As it stands right now, the Eagles have a top 10 pick at the 2023 NFL Draft. Philadelphia has 2 first-rounders, their own pick, which is likely going to be late, and the Saints' first-round pick. New Orleans and Philadelphia made a pick swap ahead of the 2022 draft, and now the Eagles have their first-rounder. So the Eagles are now completely set up for a big swing at the draft too, unless they trade that pick away at the deadline for a big splash. I feel like there is always the need to address the elephant in the room here. The chances that the Eagles finish undefeated. Well, I will say, the only team that Philadelphia has to play for the rest of the year that is actually winning its division is the Titans, who play in probably the worst division in football other than the NFC South. So on paper, yes, Philly has some kind of shot at going undefeated, but I can't see that happening. It is so incredibly difficult to go undefeated in the NFL, and the Eagles haven't even played half of their games yet this year. There is a long way to go. Philadelphia is going to slip up here at some point, I bet, but what matters is how they respond. The Eagles have a good enough team to make some noise in the postseason. And who knows, maybe Philly ends up back in the big game again like they did in 2018. The only difference this time around, a different quarterback and a different head coach leading the way.